Good morning, everyone. And it is a very good morning, not only because of the wonderful legislation, the masterful legislation that is on the floor as we speak here and that we will vote on in another hour or so, but we also celebrate 467,000 jobs created last month. We salute President Biden for his great leadership. We salute the private sector for its job creation and working together. And an adjustment from the month before, which makes it over 700,000 new jobs. So we're very excited about that because this bill that we're talking about today is a jobs bill for manufacturing in America, making it in America. And I also just want to say that coincidentally, the Olympics opened this morning in Beijing. We wish our athletes well. We salute the president for the diplomatic boycott that has been joined by other countries, and the approach that I support. As I wish the athletes well, I do not encourage them to speak out against the Chinese government there because I fear for their safety if they do. I'll remove all doubt about why I said they shouldn't speak out, because I fear for their safety. So I hope they're safe athletically, politically, and every other way. Now that we're expecting a few more chairs, but here we are, under leadership of our chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Eddie Bernice Johnson, and the respect she commands in the scientific community and the academic community, and her great intellect on this subject, that has all taken us to this day. The American Competes Act will ensure that America is preeminent in manufacturing, innovation, and economic strength, and can outcompete any nation. We are blessed by the leadership of 11 other committees working very hard to put forth policies, initiatives that were innovative, entrepreneurial, and we will be, as we go into conference, become law. I want to salute Chairman Peter DeFazio, the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Frank Pallone, Chair of Energy and Commerce, Richie Neal, Chairman of Ways and Means, Maxine Waters, Financial Services, Bobby Scott, Education and Labor, Benny Thompson, Homeland Security, Gregory Meeks, Foreign Affairs, and also Jerry Nadler from Judiciary, Carolyn Maloney from Oversight, and Raul Grijalva from Natural Resources. Because of the hearings, the meetings, and the negotiations that they had within their committees, hundreds of members of Congress have been involved in putting this legislation together, overwhelmingly bipartisan in its development, regardless of how the Republicans choose politically to vote today, substantively, policy-wise, and our chairs will speak to that. Competes meets the economic and national security imperative of bolstering American manufacturing and workers. First, with the CHIPS, an investment of $52 billion to support U.S. manufacture of chips and semiconductors, which are the lifeblood of modern technology. I asked this question, do you know how many chips are in a car? 1,000 chips in a car. In an electric car, 2,000 chips. So just think of what this is going to mean to the automotive industry when we have domestic, made in America chips readily available and not be at the mercy of other countries. The chips are increasingly made abroad, leaving us vulnerable to supply chain issues and higher costs. It's really important to know that this investment will lower cost. Secondly, the supply chain and manufacturing. We have $45 billion support the manufacture and acquisition of critical goods that are essential for our national economy, our national security, and that includes components and products for public health and biological preparedness. It includes information and communications technology. It includes energy and transportation sectors, industrial base, and agriculture and food product supply chains. So this affects just about everything. lowering cost. Third, science and research, again, with the reputation of our distinguished chair, Eddie Bernice Johnson, and research and academic community with bipartisan bills, we will be advancing U.S. scientific research and innovation excellence to ensure that we lead the technologies of the future. This is so important because years ago, there was no question we were number one. And then people followed our lead, investments in education and research and development. And then they had lower labor costs, so jobs exited. You may remember, well, maybe not many of you because you're younger, but a number of years ago when I was relatively new in Congress, we had the gathering storm, that call to action from the scientific community that there was a gathering storm of competition overseas and that we needed to do better and do more, and we are. Fourth, leading on the world stage, we are positioning U.S. interests and values to win in the world arena, including holding the People's Republic of China accountable for genocide and using slave labor. This is not just a values issue in terms of human rights. This is a competition issue, making our workers in our country compete with slave labor in China. Again, as the Olympics begin today, I reiterate my concern about and I fear for the physical safety of those who may speak out. I do want to, as I said yesterday at the Congressional Executive Commission on China hearing on this situation, I applaud President Biden as I did already. I just want to also add that in our country, we are blessed with a magnificent, and I can speak firsthand about this representing San Francisco in the Congress, the Asian Pacific American community is a vital part of our community. We are talking about American preeminence as we contrast with China. We don't want anyone transferring any of that, as some have done, including the former president, onto Asian Americans in our country. We're proud of Competes, we're proud of our members, we look forward to expeditiously going to conference and hope to hear from the Senate soon. And now I'm pleased to yield to our very distinguished chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, Eddie Bernice Johnson.
Good morning. Good morning. It is a pleasure to be here with Speaker Pelosi and all of the committee chairs who have played an extraordinarily important role in bringing the America Competes Act to the floor. I'm excited that we are voting in the House today to finish this transformative piece of legislation. It has been an honor to join in leading the effort to ensure that the United States is able to compete globally. As chair of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, we spent long hours, from way over a year, doing the research. And with this legislation, we are making critically needed investments to strengthen our national innovation capabilities. We are building clean energy solutions, addressing climate change and crisis, reinforcing our national security, enhancing our semiconductor research and manufacturing capabilities, and so much more. We're also taking historic and much needed action to build a strong and diverse STEM workforce, something that I've had as a priority since I've been in Congress. Provisions in this bill were built with rigorous input from the scientific community, industry, academia, and other stakeholders of what we needed to know to address our challenges for the 21st century. I'd like to thank everyone who worked hard, most especially our extraordinary staff, and all of the chairs here and their staffs. And I'd especially like to thank the ranking member of the Science Committee, Mr. Frank Lucas, for his partnership on this strong bipartisan provisions that are included in this America Competes. We passed a bulk of bills from the committee with bipartisan support. and most passed the House with overwhelming votes. And so we know that we have done the homework openly and fairly. The bill we are voting on today is critical to the future competitiveness and well-being of our nation. I look forward to its swift passage in the House, and hopefully we'll get a cooperation with the Senate, working with the Senate, and get it to the President in a short amount of time. I cannot emphasize more how important this is for the prosperity for our future in this nation. I thank you, and I now will present to you my distinguished colleague, Chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, Mr. Pelosi.
Good job, Eddie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie Bernice, and let me thank the Speaker. The Speaker has really gone out of her way, as she always does, to make sure that this legislation moves and gets over to the Senate so we can go to conference. And Eddie Bernice, of course, so much of what we do in terms of our global preeminence and our competition relates to moving forward on science, research, and development in her committee. I just want to talk briefly about the energy and commerce role, if I can. I mean, obviously, as the Speaker said, the idea here is to continue to lead the global economy, and doing that by investing in our workers, our manufacturing, and critical goods, making critical goods manufactured here in the United States. And we know for too long in the last few years we have reliance on goods coming from other countries, and over the last 40 years America's manufacturing sector has lost market share to economic competitors like China, and that decline, along with the COVID crisis, has led to supply chain disruptions, which everybody's very much aware of. So what the America Competes Act tries to do is to try to eliminate these shortages, and it does that. One of the ways it does that is this $45 million pot of money that gives grants and loans to support supply chain resilience. So if you want to bring back a manufacturing plant from another country to the U.S., we'll help you. And now I'll have a new office in the Department of Commerce to basically deal with that. And specifically with regard to energy and commerce, we try to bolster semiconductor manufacturing, we expand the production of components needed for solar panels, and we improve our medical product supply chain. And we do that by having a specific program to foster with regard to the production of drugs, what we call continuous manufacturing technology. That's something that we've started in a major way at Rutgers in my congressional district. And we also strengthen and replenish and modernize the strategic national stockpile for both the federal government as well as states. And then finally, we try to do more to modernize our semiconductor capacity. So I wanted to say, with the passage of this legislation shortly, we're going to ensure that America can outcompete, I should say, the rest of the world and end our reliance on other nations for the manufacturing of critical goods. That's basically the heart of this. And with that, I'd like to introduce now the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, who we partner with on so many things with energy and commerce, Richie Neal.
Thanks, Frank. Thanks, Frank, and to the team that's assembled here today. Word of congratulations. Thanks to Eddie for the special efforts that were made. Thank the Speaker for something else that oftentimes is underreported in Washington, and that is, once again, she stood up for the prerogatives of the House, which is an essential part of allowing committee chairpersons to do their work in the regular order. This is a very pivotal moment. As earlier described, one of the challenges that America has is that we still have the edge in terms of innovation and creativity in the world. The difficulty is that because you can do production just about anywhere now, they replicate our innovation with lower wages. So keeping our competitive posture is essential. The Competes Act that you're witnessing today has done precisely that. It will bolster the economy, it will reinforce technological leadership, and we can't be content with complacency. Still, nothing comes close to what our universities and colleges provide. The trade provisions in the Ways and Means Committee perspective, they largely are very important because of the fact that we supercharge America's opportunities through GSP. Once again, we strengthen anti-dumping competition, countervailing duties laws to protect America from unfair Chinese competition. We also understand that in terms of sovereign capitalism, they can move faster, but they still need innovation and creativity, which overwhelmingly belongs to us. I still want to acknowledge as well Earl Blumenauer. He did a great job as the Trade Subcommittee Chairman on this. The General System of Preferences and Miscellaneous Tariff Bill legislation that's included is essential. And I want to say this because this is perhaps the most important thing that the Ways and Means Committee contributed. Trade adjustment assistance, because of the dislocations that from time to time create hollowed out parts of the American economy for people through no practices of their own are punished. And it's because of the unfair trade practices that frequently take place. That was a great jobs report this morning. Give it a moment just to tickle the early week analysis on that. It was supposed to be very bad. Once again, the stories all became, rather than waiting for the evidence, this was going to be bad. 466,000 jobs, 6 million jobs since Joe Biden became president. The other part of this legislation, I was with Catherine Tai yesterday, it empowers the U.S. Trade Representative to take strategic steps to improve supply chain resiliency. This legislation is going to pass today. Really well done, and as always, my friend, Chairwoman Waters, offered her dimension to this legislation.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you so very much for being here with us this morning. This is extraordinarily important legislation, and I want to thank the Speaker for her leadership. This is the kind of leadership that makes America great. Of course, we have experienced supply chain problems with this pandemic, and we've learned an awful lot about slave labor that creates the ability for some countries, particularly China, to produce goods very cheaply. And so understanding all of this, we are now in the leadership, again, of innovation, and we are competitive, and we're going to grow with our competitiveness. So with that, I want you to know that the America Competes Act is a transformational piece of legislation that will empower American workers and businesses. It will also strengthen our nation's financial system and allow us to better compete with the rest of the world, especially with the People's Republic of China. It's more important than ever that we take action to maintain our competitiveness and counter anti-competitive actions taken by the PRC. The good news is that the American Competitiveness Act will put us in a position to do just that. Under my leadership as chairwoman of the Financial Services Committee, our members secured provisions that protect our national security and global financial stability. This bill ends World Bank and Asian Development Bank funding into China unless such assistance contributes to a global public good and serves the U.S. national interests. Another provision secures the PRC's participation in multilateral sovereign debt treatment initiatives. It adds long overdue transparency to the shadow or exempt securities markets and has other provisions to combat ransomware, examine the financing of wildlife trafficking, and study illicit finance links with Afghanistan. Finally, the bill strengthens the Defense Production Act authorities to protect the supply chains of medical products. So I'm grateful for the hard work of the members of my committee, including Representatives Hines, Sherman, Dean, Lynch, Torres, Ocasio-Cortez, and Vargas, along with other committee members in the House and Speaker Pelosi, who are working tirelessly to get this bill passed. America Competes helps America and its workers to stay competitive for generations to come. I look forward to engaging with my colleagues in the Senate to quickly finish the upcoming conference so that we can send this bill to the President for his signature. Let me just take a moment to say to Eddie Bernice, thank you so very much for your leadership. She has taken time, even though she's announced that she is retiring, but she has taken this opportunity prior to leaving us to lead us in a way that will be recorded in history for years to come. Thank you so very much. Oh, I better announce. The next chairman that we have is the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee, Chairman Meeks.
Thank you, and let me take the opportunity also to thank the speaker. She's a woman that always has a vision for tomorrow, how to make sure that what we do today has an effect to our children and grandchildren tomorrow. That's extremely important. So I want to thank Chairwoman Pelosi and thank, of course, Chairwoman Johnson. You know, when you talk about technology, we all know science and technology, if we're going to have a better future, we've got to master that. And her whole career has been focused on science and technology. Now, we know that China has leveraged its growth to chip away at the prevailing economic, political, and security order in the world. It has bullied other nations into yielding to its demands, and it has consistently broken international law and refused to play by the rules. Where there's a vacuum of leadership, China will seek to fill that vacuum. And that is why the United States must win the competition with China, offering leadership that embodies our values of democracy and human rights, and positioning ourselves to win the economic and technological competition with China. As chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, we've worked to build into the America Competes Act provisions that would considerably bolster U.S. bilateral diplomacy and increase our diplomatic footprint where it's still lacking. The Competes Act does this by expanding our diplomacy at regional organizations and through groupings like the Quad, ensuring that we are at the table and setting the rules of the road, and not the People's Republic of China. It also incorporates strong provisions on human rights, including sanctions related to China's genocide in Xinjiang, refugee protections for the Uyghurs, and the Hong Kong Freedom and Choice Act. Furthermore, it bolsters our alliances and partnerships with our other ace in the hole in the competition with China. By recentering diplomacy in our foreign policy, America Competes will restore America's global credibility and our leadership. We cannot be complacent about America's economic strength and global position. Today, by passing the American Competes Act, Congress will show the American people and the world, with clarity of purpose and the courage of our convictions, that we do not take our global leadership for granted, that we will not miss the opportunity to strengthen American industry and create jobs of the future for our workers, and that America will continue to maintain and defend the international rules-based system that has contributed to peace and prosperity for millions. So we are grateful for the Competes Act today, and I now would like to bring up the chairman of the Transportation Committee, Chairman DeFazio.
Thanks. Good morning, and again, thanks to the Speaker for moving the Competes Act through the House. You know, vast swaths of America have been deindustrialized or otherwise lost their jobs to unfair foreign competition. Millions of Americans despair of the hope of a good job, a good future for themselves, their families, middle-class lifestyle, the American dream. Well, with this bill, we give them hope. We let them know that the Democrats care. And it ends now with this president reindustrializing America, bringing back critical manufacturing to this country with the incentives in this bill, and with this bill in the House of Representatives. And hopefully we will prevail over the bill from the Senate, which actually, in my opinion, would make things worse. So, there is a provision in this bill which is a pilot version of a program which was in Build Back Better, put forward by Representative Kilmer, called the Recompete Act. Like me, he represents areas largely outside of major urban areas where jobs have just dried up, disappeared, gone overseas, even from states like ours. And the idea is to give these communities a new opportunity, to give them the assistance they need, to bring in the worker training, to bring in the targeted development, to bring in the infrastructure that they need in those communities to attract new industries, new businesses, and those who are returning to the United States of America and being rebuilt in the United States of America. This is an incredibly important addition to this bill, but the whole bill itself is historic. It would really turn the page on America's trade failures of the past and give us new hope for all Americans. And with that, I yield to Chairman Bobby Scott of the Education and Labor Committee.
Thank you, Chairman DeFazio, for your kind introduction, and I want to add my thanks to the Speaker for her leadership and Chairman Johnson for her leadership in this legislation. I want to thank all of the committee chairs for their work on the America Competes Act. In today's global economy, America's workers and employers are not just competing for jobs in nearby cities or even a neighboring state. Every local economy across the nation is engaged in competition for workers and businesses around the world. And we have a responsibility to make sure America stays a step ahead by providing proper education for future workers and strengthening our nation's workforce. The American Competes Act will connect students and workers with the skills they need to succeed in high-tech industries while strengthening our economy's competitiveness in years ahead. These investments will help expand access to computer science education and post-secondary STEM pathways, particularly for those who have historically been left behind. In my home state of Virginia, access to STEM education will help support world-class research facilities like the Jefferson Lab and local colleges and universities, creating opportunities for students, researchers, and scientists to conduct research that benefits all of us. And to that end, I'm pleased that the American Competes Act also invests in the continued work of the Department of Energy's Office of Science and National Labs. The legislation also builds on the broad bipartisan support for apprenticeships. Last year, over 24 House Republicans joined Democrats in voting to pass a reauthorization of the National Apprenticeship Act, which will create nearly 1 million new registered apprenticeship opportunities. The American Competes Act also includes a provision of this legislation along with key protections to ensure the jobs we create will pay a decent wage. Helping workers gain in-demand jobs is vital to the prosperity of working families, businesses, and the nation. Today, the House is taking a critical step in the right direction, and we're eager to work with our Senate colleagues to put a bipartisan bill on the President's desk that will ensure a brighter future for workers in the 21st century global economy. Again, I want to thank all of my colleagues for their work, and I now want to yield to the chairman of the Committee on Homeland Security, the gentleman from Mississippi, Benny Thompson.
Thank you very much. Let me say I associate myself with everything you've heard from all my colleagues this morning. Clearly, the Competes Act is something that's vitally needed. We have to get our competitiveness back where it used to be. We've outsourced too many of those opportunities overseas. This legislation does it. Clearly, from the Homeland Security perspective, the equipment that is now made overseas and sent back here for Americans, we need to make sure that that equipment, if possible, should be made here in America. The incentives created by this act will make that occur. So I'm excited about it. I support the effort. Believe it or not, in this environment, it's absolutely a bipartisan effort. So we don't get that many times, so people get it. I look forward to the passage of it. I support the Speaker and her leadership in this effort. And so with that, I yield back to the Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank all of our chairs who presented today, as well as three of members who couldn't be here. Chairman Nadler of the Judiciary Committee, Congresswoman Maloney, Chairwoman of the Oversight Committee, and Chair Grijalva of Natural Resources, all who also contributed to the excellence and success of this legislation. I feel like repeating everything you've heard, but that would be presumptuous of me. But whether it's the education of our children, the competitiveness of our workers, the resources that we need, our chairs have put out there very thoughtful proposals on how to keep America number one. Let me just close by saying this. Because of what they have done and the work they've done in their committees, largely and overwhelmingly bipartisan, regardless of the vote, it is about making America independent, self-sufficient. Self-sufficient when it comes to chips, so that we can be manufacturing more efficiently in our country, lowering cost. Self-sufficient when it comes to the supply chain, so that we're not depending on other countries at the mercy or vulnerable to other, and sometimes countries of concern, lowering cost. So we're raising our excellence, lowering our cost, enabling our people to participate more fully in the success and prosperity of our nation. And it would not be possible without the great intellectual resource that Eddie Bernice is, the leadership of all of our chairs, the work of so many on both sides of the aisle to make that possible. We're now going to go to the floor and shortly vote to make America independent, self-sufficient, and again, successful. With that, I thank you all for being with us and yield back. Thank you.